Thank you so much for having me. Again, I'm honored to be with you. I'd like to start just by congratulating everybody who's participating on this Zoom call. Congratulations on all of your accomplishments. I know the process to get to this event was competitive, so well done to all of you. I think back to when I was your age. I started university in 1985 when I was 18 years old. And at my university, the ratio of men to women was about 7-1. So I know Delia was making reference to the fact that there just weren't a lot of women in this space just back 20, 30 or more years ago. So the fact that at my university, the ratio was 7-1 meant that for every one woman in the classroom, there were 7 men. And in some of my classes, I was the only woman. And the few women on our campus, when we would get together, we would tell this one joke. We would say that in the context of getting dates, our odds were quite good, but the goods were quite odd. So that was a joke that we used to commiserate about. So as an aside, I want to show you 2 pictures. So the first is this picture of me in 1985 when I was beginning university. So I just want to bring to your attention in this picture that I am not wearing glasses. So why is that noteworthy? Well, I've worn glasses pretty much every day of my life since I was 5 years old. But when I was a teenager, when I was in 10th grade and 11th grade, about the age where you guys are right now, I was a teenager and I was so worried about looking or not looking a certain way that I squinted my way through most of my 11th grade and my 12th grade and into my first year in university because, again, I was just so concerned about what other people thought. Now, 40 years after the fact, if I could go back and talk to that 18-year-old girl, I would say, just own it, just wear the glasses, just be who you are, and don't worry about what other people think. I'd like to bring one other slide to your attention, and that's this one. And this picture comes from 1918. So no, I'm not in this one, but the picture is from my university. This is from a football game at my university, again in 1918. So there's 2 things that I want you to recognize in this picture. The first is, every single person in this picture is male, which at my university, they didn't accept their first their one female student until 1917. But probably more importantly, the picture looks very familiar to you because everybody is wearing a mask. This picture was taken during the global influenza panic known as, quote, the Spanish flu, where everybody was required to wear a mask to be out in public. Yes, again, unfortunately, I'm going to assume this image is all too familiar to everybody who's on this call right now. So the reason I inserted this picture from my university is just to remind you that what you're going through right now, what we're all experiencing globally is difficult, but importantly, it's also temporary. We will be able to gather again soon. I hope I'm with you in person next year, and we'll be able to look back and say, remember the time we had to wear masks? I'm so glad that time is behind us. So again, where we are right now is temporary. So returning to the more recent past, again, when I was starting university in 1985, there was one computer on my campus. So I want you to think about that for a minute. There was one computer at my university that all students had access to. Again, I want you to digest that for a minute. The concept of actually having a computer for your personal use, a computer in your dorm room, was completely unheard of. Nobody understood that concept. If you talked about that, people would have laughed at you. At my first year in university, we had time tickets to use the mainframe, as it was called at our university. And my allotted time on this computer was between 1 o'clock in the morning and 1:15 in the morning. So why am I walking around campus at 1 o'clock in the morning trying to get to my one computer that I have access to? Well, it's because I had a shoebox full of these things. These were called punch cards, and I had to feed punch cards into a mainframe to generate output from a computer program that I wrote for a class. So I was actually not a very good computer programmer. And so it took me an immense amount of time. And I'm going to share a secret with you. Even today, I'm not a particularly strong programmer. Much like you, I was always very good in math. And I picked up enough computer science that I could eventually go on to be successful in statistics. But computer programming was not my strength. My program that I would have written back in 1985 may have been as complex as a very simple linear equation with maybe 50 observations, 50 pieces of data going into that program. And it took me days to write this program. And so I would go in at 1 o'clock in the morning and I would feed these punch cards into the one computer on campus. And then I would have to go back the next day to pick up my output. I'd have to walk all the way back over to the computer science center that looked something like this to pick up my output. And so I knew if my program had run and I only had 1 or 2 pages of output, they would happily hand my output back to me. But if I went back and I had to run into this guy who would look at me and he'd say, "Oh, right, you squinty. The one that should be wearing her glasses," he'd have to go in the back to pick up my output, which frequently was more than 1,000 pages. And I would get a very grumpy look from this guy. I knew that at that point I'd forgotten to close a loop somewhere on my computer program. Well, I'm happy to say that a lot of things have changed since 1985. First of all, the hairstyles are a lot better. And I'm sure you're all going to agree that the music is a lot better today than probably what your parents listened to. Another change that we see today versus what we experienced in 1985 is that the gender ratio of students that are studying mathematics and statistics and computer science is changing. The gender ratio at my university, while still lower than most of us would like to see it, is vastly improved. Last time I checked, it was about 1.5 men to every woman versus when I was there, it was 7 men to every woman. 1.5 is probably not where it should be. We're hoping to get it down to about 1-to-1, but it certainly is better than it used to be. Another change is that we don't have to deal with punch cards anymore, right? We don't have to walk around a university campus at 1 o'clock in the morning to have our one time ticket on some kind of massive shared computer for every student across the university. Today, I suspect that most of you have multiple computers that you have access to, including possibly one in your pocket or one in your book bag. It's a far cry from the massive mainframe that I had to access in 1985. Importantly, the way we think about data has changed, and really about computing, and the role of mathematics in data has changed. So again, when I was in school, data, if we even talked about data, was really defined as structured tables with rows and with columns. However, most of the data that you are generating every day is what we now refer to as unstructured. So I want you to think about every text, every tweet, every snap on Snapchat, every post on Instagram. Think about all the activity tracking through global locators that are on your phone. You are generating a lot of data every day. Now, while estimates and definitions vary, humans generate about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day. So wait, I know that's a big number, but I want you to think about this. That's a 2 and a 5 followed by 18 zeros. So I know you guys are good at math. So think about that number for a minute. But maybe if we put it a little bit more specifically, we've generated more data in the whole, we've generated more data in the last 2 years than we have in the whole of human history. We've generated more data in the last 2 years than we have in the whole of human history. So I want you to think about that for a minute. Humans have been around for a long time. We've generated more data in the last 2 years than in the whole of human history. And with over 50 billion connected devices and growing, the amount of data that we're going to continue to capture every day is just continuing to get bigger and bigger. It's continuing to grow, and it's growing at an increasing rate. If I'm fortunate enough to be with you guys next year, then I suspect we'll be able to change the statement to say we've generated more data in the last year than we have in the whole of human history. Now, again, back when I was your age in 1985, the concept of computer science was such a new concept. People my age didn't talk about computer science. In fact, we hadn't really heard about that term. If we knew anything about it, it really meant something to do with programming. We really didn't think about, certainly we didn't think about this intersection of computer science and mathematics and statistics. We didn't think about them together because they were so separate at most universities, at all universities. We certainly couldn't have thought about the fact that computer science and mathematics and statistics would one day come together in a crucial way to form the skills that people would need in the future today to translate all of that data into information to solve problems. Today, being good at math is cool, at least it's kind of cool, and they're fun skills to develop. And you would not be here today if you were not strong in math. And for many of you, it's like solving puzzles or playing games. But as you consider your future education, I want to challenge you to think a little bit more deeply. So I want you to think about one issue. I want you to pause, and I want you to think about one issue. I want you to think about one challenge or one problem that you see that's facing your community. Something that's like a rock in your shoe that just you think about every day and every night. Maybe you see plastic bottles on the side of the road. Maybe you see plastic in the ocean. Maybe there's children in your community who do not have access to reliable, clean water. Or maybe the people in your community don't have access to a reliable power grid. Maybe you have a family who's experienced cancer or AIDS, and certainly the whole planet is suffering right now from COVID. So remember those 2.5 quintillion bytes of data that we generate every day? Well, somewhere hidden in that massive haystack of data are the solutions to these issues, to the challenge or to the problem that you are thinking about right now, something that's important to your community. The solution to reducing and ultimately eliminating single-use plastic through environmentally sustainable packaging is buried somewhere in that data. The solution to improve sanitation and access to clean water is somewhere buried in that data. The solution to detecting, the solution to finding a cure for HIV or for cancer is buried somewhere in that data. And we're learning how to fight COVID. We're finding the vaccinations and determining how effective these vaccinations are through data. We just have to develop the skills, the methods, and the technology that we need to extract the solutions that will make a difference in our communities. The innovators, the scientists, the great discoverers of these solutions will be those who today are excelling in mathematics. So as evidenced by your presence here today, I suspect that in many ways, you already know all this. Studying computational disciplines will help propel your career and better equip you to contribute to your community and contribute to your society. But you know what, there's a second point here that I want to make. And the second point might actually be more important. Yes, you will benefit from studying computational sciences. That is a true statement. But what you may not fully appreciate is that the computational sciences needs you. With all of the improvements, with the better hairstyles, with the improvements in music over what your parents listen to, believe it or not, the number of women who are entering the computational fields is going down. And it's going down at an alarming rate. You can see some of the numbers that I put up in front of you. While the number of women that are going into the physical sciences, into biology and medicine, into law school has increased over time, the number and the proportion of women who are studying computer science, computational science, and unfortunately data science has actually gone down. Did you know that only about 20% of the practicing data scientists in the world right now are female? You're so fortunate to be led by inspiring leaders like Dean North and by her team, because that profile, that number of women is really unheard of globally. Women represent about 23% of the technical workforce at Facebook and at Google. And these figures are, believe it or not, a vast improvement over where they were 5 years ago when it was only 15%. And the overwhelming proportion of programmers, of data scientists and analysts at these companies are white or Asian. Black employees represented less than 6% of the total technical workforce at Apple and Google and Facebook. A survey from last year of those who use this platform called Stack Overflow, which is one of these primary crowdsourced platforms for documentation related to most analytical programming languages, indicated that 93% of the participants globally on Stack Overflow were male and 90% were either white or Asian. Less than 7% of the people who are engaged on Stack Overflow were female, and less than 3% were Black. These numbers are troubling, and they're not just troubling from the standpoint of equality and diversity. These numbers are troubling because the lack of demographic representation is contributing to bad algorithms that are affecting our lives. So consider this. Last year, it came to light that the algorithm that calculates credit quotas for Apple's credit card gave higher limits to men than it did to women with the exact same profiles. Steve Wozniak, one of the co-founders of Apple, a few weeks ago, stated that his wife was offered a lower line on the product, on the Apple card, with the same household income and the same address. Now, this is Steve Wozniak talking. He was one of the co-founders of Apple, and his wife was a victim of this bad algorithm. I was actually recently walking with a girlfriend, and she told me a very similar story, that she and her husband had both applied for the new Apple credit card. Again, same household, same income, same address, and her line was $1,000 lower than her husband's line. This is not okay. You may be familiar with Joy Buolamwini. She's a Black female data scientist working as a researcher at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the United States. She's originally from Ghana. She was one of the first research scientists in the United States to determine that facial recognition algorithms that are used by IBM and Microsoft generated very different levels of classification accuracy. The algorithms performed well if the individual was light-skinned and male, but performed particularly poorly if the individual had darker skin and the individual in question was female. Again, not okay. So do data scientists, do the people that put together these algorithms, the people that studied mathematics and computer science and statistics, who developed the algorithms that power the Apple credit card, the algorithms that power these big facial recognition algorithms that decide so much about whether or not we can travel and the extent to which we can move around our countries and the extent to which we're recognized for security purposes, do these data scientists develop algorithms that are purposefully discriminatory? You know, I actually think the answer is no. I don't think that most data scientists go into an algorithmic exercise with the intention to do harm. Rarely do people have ill intent. I think the problem is that most data and computer scientists don't understand the harm they can do. And they're not coming into these algorithms with the same life experiences, the same perspectives, and the same lens through which they're seeing the world that you do. And it's not their fault, but these algorithms need you. In analytics and data science, in all computational disciplines, greater diversity of contribution is not just a nice to have. We need the skills, we need the talents, we need the reasoning from across the racial and ethnic continuums to participate in the algorithmic logic that is increasingly shaping our lives, making decisions related to our healthcare, to our finances, to our ability to travel, to our communities. In particular, we need the voices of young women. We need your life experiences to be heard in these algorithms. I want to see you be confident in what you can bring to this conversation. We need your voice and we need you to be confident. Again, from a recent survey from that same platform that I was referencing, Stack Overflow, when asked to evaluate their own competence for the kind of work they do and their years of experience, 67% of men indicated that they were above average. I want you to think about that for a minute. From the same survey, fewer than 40% of women indicated that they were average. I'll let that joke sit in for a minute. So girls with the same level of coding experience are less likely to define themselves as confident in their abilities. As someone who represents the generation that's ahead of you, and maybe even 2 generations ahead of you, it brings me some sense of encouragement to know that there are young girls like you who are strong in mathematics, who are going to form the next generation of computational sciences. So the last slide that I want to leave you here is of some very distinguished women from South Africa. Daphne Matabulu was the first woman in South Africa, there in the upper left, to earn her doctoral degree in mathematics at the University of Venda. She was also the first person to obtain a PhD in mathematics, whether male or female, from the village where she was born. Cassie Kosarikov, who's there in the upper right, is one of the world's leading data scientists. She's the chief decision scientist at Google. And she states that her mission is to democratize decision intelligence and safe and fair, reliable artificial intelligence. She's challenging the face literally and figuratively of decision algorithms at Google. Wanda Orlikowski, there in the bottom left, was born and raised in Johannesburg. Today, she's a professor of information technology, again, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston. She's one of the premier which is one of the premier research universities in the world, and she's one of the premier research scientists at that institution. She investigates the social and technological aspects of working virtually. So I would assume she's pretty busy right now. Rapalong Rabana, there in the bottom right, is a computer scientist from South Africa. She's an entrepreneur and is the founder and chair of Rekindle Learning, a learning technology company, and previously co-founded South Africa's first free mobile internet service provider. These are some of the young women from South Africa that are changing the face of the computational sciences, and they should serve as great points of inspiration for all of you. I also want to remind you that the United States has elected its first female vice president. Kamala Harris's father was Jamaican and her mother is Indian. And so she brings such an important and bright, fresh voice into so many of the communications that are happening within my country to ensure, again, that women and women of color and our voices are heard across the entire continuum. And so it's exciting to have Vice President Harris now representing my country. So yes, I encourage you to study the computational sciences. Mathematics, statistics, and computer science are going to serve you well. But I want to leave you today understanding that really it's the computational sciences that needs you. As young women excelling in mathematics, as young women excelling in mathematics, you are the future of your communities. You are the future of South Africa. You can mine the data and find the solutions to sustainable packaging, to curing cancer, to finding a cure for AIDS, for ensuring consistent and reliable access to clean water and to energy. But importantly, too, you can contribute in deep and meaningful ways to the algorithms that are shaping our lives, not just within your community, not just within Africa, but across the entire country. You can make choices and contribute in ways that are going to frame the lives of your daughters and your granddaughters and my daughter and my granddaughters. And while I don't know that I'm going to be able to come to you to this event 40 years in the future, although I know Dean North will probably be with you and doing one of these events 40 years in the future, I do expect to read over the next 40 years about the contributions that you are making to our world. And the path to those contributions starts with mathematics.